Hello and welcome back to Season 9, Episode 16 of the Everyday Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Green. This is a podcast where we remind ourselves that God deserves every praise from every creature every day. This is a podcast with the Scattered Abroad Network. We have a lot of different podcasts for you to listen to each day of the week. Hope that you'll go check out our master feed so you can see all the different podcasts that we have to offer from various hosts. Of course, this is a work of the Memphis School of Preaching, and we're very thankful for the Memphis School of Preaching and the Forest Hill Church of Christ in Memphis, Tennessee, for overseeing this work. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. This episode is going to be the second part of our discussion with Matt McBrayer on Modesty that we started last week. And Matt and I had been talking about how difficult it is to preach on this subject. And we've talked about some different circumstances in our preaching lives related to that, and how even though it is difficult and really caused tremendous difficulty for Matt, because he mentions that he was fired for preaching on this one time, but that doesn't take away from our obligation, our responsibility to preach on it. This is part of the whole counsel of God, and so we are going to both preach and teach what the Bible has to say about this subject of modesty. So let's tune back in and let's finish that discussion on the Christian virtue of modesty.
I fear that we're not doing that because so many men that fill these pulpits are involved in some of this stuff and are not willing to talk about it because they either do it, in practicality on day by day, or maybe they're addicted to pornography or something like that, and they are unwilling to get up and talk about it.
Yeah, or maybe wife and children maybe are not dressing properly.
Maybe, yeah.
They feel hypocritical, or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just they're scared to cover this subject. And look, I mean, I have trembled when I've covered this subject before.
I've got fired for it once.
Really?
Yeah. I was having no issues really at a congregation. I preached this subject. Couple of months later, it took a little bit because people kept bringing it up, and then finally, it was like, let's find something to pin against Matt. It was very obvious. Right. I had taken my time. I had been there, I think, for a couple of years, and I was like, well, I think now's the time. And so then I talked about it, and I really even didn't think anybody was involved in it. That didn't matter. It didn't matter. It became a very sore subject really quick. So,
yep. Well, I mean, it is plainly a part of preaching the whole counsel of God.
Right.
Let's show that. Let's see what the scriptures say about it. First Timothy 2, verse 9. In like manner also that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation. The King James Version says shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. What do you think about that verse, Matt?
Yeah, well, shamefacedness is the idea of bashfulness or the ability to blush. So, you should, you hear people say they have no shame, and that is they have, they don't have the ability to be embarrassed. Well, here's the thing is that some people should be embarrassed by what they're wearing and the lack thereof, and they are not. Yeah. So,
yeah, we're living in a society that has largely, to a very large degree, lost its shame.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds very similar to Jeremiah 8, verse 12, were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? No, they were not at all ashamed, nor did they know how to blush. Therefore they shall fall among those who fall. In the time of their punishment they shall be cast down, says the Lord. Regarding that word sobriety used in the King James Version, it's the idea of a sane mind. And so parents, next time someone wants to leave the house, one of the children wants to leave the house wearing something inappropriate, first of all, hopefully you haven't bought them anything that could be worn inappropriately, but maybe they snuck around and bought something on their own. I don't know. But next time somebody wants to leave the house and wearing something that is inappropriate, you have every right to say, have you lost your mind?
Yeah. Are you crazy?
Right. Because sobriety here and shamefacedness is the idea of having a sane mind. It is insane, we might say, to wear certain things that are not appropriate to be worn in public.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and for dads to not police that a little bit, for their daughters and their wife, you are inviting other men to lust after your wife and your daughters. How disgusting is that? Like, I don't know. I got a lot to say about that, but I guess I'll just stop right there. But yeah, that's disgusting.
Just go back to the brain scan we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want male brains surrounding our daughters with that part of the brain lighting up? Tool to be used. To be used. Is that what we want for our daughters? Of course not. We don't want anything bad to happen to our daughters or our wives. So why would we send them out of the house wearing things they shouldn't be wearing? It just boggles my mind.
Well, and I kind of hesitated to bring this up, but I think that I think warrants a discussion, and maybe I'll be very gentle in the way I say this, but why do you think that there are a lot of women joggers that have been sexually attacked? I mean, it's the attire, partially here, but you've got. I understand that is not right at all for a man to do that, but you're kind of putting yourself in a situation where a man looks at you as an object and not as a human being.
You're putting yourself in danger.
Yes.
And it's very unwise. I mean, even, the sinful part of it aside for a second, it's very unwise to put yourself in danger like that. And sadly, those sorts of things happen a lot. And it's terrible, those things that happen. But absolutely, there is a safety component to this.
Yeah.
And that sometimes goes unsaid, but it does need to be said.
Well, and, I think kind of where we're going with this, and actually, you know what, I'll actually hold my thoughts for a minute and then I'll come back with it.
Oh boy. Can't wait. Let's go to 1 Peter 3 verses 1 through 4. As you can see, this particular episode, there's a lot that needs to be said that a lot of folks are not willing to say. I know Brother Matt, and I know where he stands on these things, and I appreciate Matt. I know that he's willing to say the things that are not necessarily fun to say, but we want to teach the truth on this subject. So let's look at 1 Peter 3 verses 1 through 4. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands. That's controversial today. I mean, that's not the subject of modesty, but still, I mean, should we just ignore that? Should we just pretend like that's not in the Bible? Okay. So wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. When they observe your chaste conduct, accompanied by fear, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart with the, and I love this, incorruptible beauty. I love that. That is a wonderful way. I think I've titled some of my modesty sermons that, incorruptible beauty. That's a wonderful way to describe a virtuous woman who is presenting herself properly. So it says the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God.
Yeah. So my thought here is kind of a little bit in retrospect for wives, but also for young women that would be looking to get married. And that is, if you are dressing immodestly, you are going to draw in the wrong type of person. If you want somebody who's going to take care of you and love you for who you are, and to provide for you and all those things, it's usually not going to be related to someone who looks at you in that sexual way right from the beginning. Usually those kind of people will not have, they're not going to have the right kind of attitude. They're not going to be Christ-like for sure, at least in the beginning. They might become that way, as this verse is kind of indicating. But you you're attracting the wrong thing. You're attracting something that you really don't want. You want someone who's going to love you and going to help you go to heaven. Well, that's not going to happen if you're attracting somebody through physical means only. Yeah. So yeah, it's not good. We got to be careful about those kind of things.
And that's a great point. Now, is there a physical attraction component to dating or courting or however you want to call it? Well, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, sure, a young man's going to say, well, she's really pretty. But he needs to leave it at that until they're married. She's really pretty. I can't wait to marry her. And then when you get married, then, the rest of the component, if you will, of marriage will follow. But if all he's interested in is one thing, to use the expression, he's not a good guy. And maybe can a guy like that repent of that thought process and become a nice, solid, strong Christian? Of course he can.
Right.
Any sin can be repented of, but is that what you want to go looking for and go attracting for your daughter to find somebody like that? Of course not. We want, hopefully, our daughters to find the young man that is interested in the right things. And then, the benefits of marriage, they will come with marriage, of course, but that's not what he's looking for as his primary attraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Genesis chapter 3, we're very familiar with Genesis chapter 3 about the first sin with Adam and Eve. But do you remember what Adam and Eve did when they realized that they were naked?
Man, they went and hid themselves.
They hid themselves, and they ended up sewing some rudimentary clothing out of fig leaves.
Yep.
Probably something similar to a loincloth.
Yep.
And it wasn't enough because God went and had animal skins, probably killing an animal, unless maybe it was wool from a sheep or something, but probably, I think, killing an animal, therefore the first sacrifice, so that they could have animal skins to make tunics, which would have covered them more thoroughly. And heavily implied here is that they had to be covered more because what they had made for themselves was not enough covering. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I have oftentimes referenced this as likely the first sacrifice. It doesn't come out and say it, but the implication, of course, is that with sin, which they have sinned by eating of that forbidden fruit there, but they sinned in that regard, and then they ended up realizing that they've done wrong because of their knowledge now has come to them, and so it required blood. It required blood as a sacrifice, and so I wholeheartedly think that that's what's going on. But yeah, they had to have God made them tunics of skin, which when you look up that word, that is a covering that covers from the neck to the knees. And so it when you look at this at its basest form, then everybody needs to be covered from the neck to the knees. Of course, there's the exception of the marriage, and then also when not in mixed company. I think there's some limitations that we might think about these days that I hadn't thought of in previous years. But like with homosexuality and things like that, if you were in a situation like that, man, I don't listen. If I go to the gym and I'm in the locker room, I find a stall and I change in because you
just never know.
I just don't know what's going on, and I don't want to find out. And so, but if I'm around, Christian men, and we were, at Bible camp, it's a little bit different story. Obviously, not trying to be lewd, but just changing clothes and taking care of business is not a problem here in same-sex company. But other than that, you need to be covered to the neck and knees when you're around other people. So, yeah.
And we can further that discussion with a couple of passages in Exodus. Exodus 28, verse 42. This was instruction for the bottom half of garments that the Levitical priests were to wear. It says, "And you shall make for them linen trousers to cover their nakedness." Okay. Has the definition of nakedness, has that ever changed in history? Did God change How? I mean, how could we say
Yeah.
that God has changed his standard definition of nakedness? Okay, so let's
Right.
find out what it says. You shall make for them linen trousers to cover their nakedness. They shall reach from the waist to their thighs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been said before that if some brethren, if Colonel Sanders defined thighs as some brethren do, then he wouldn't have sold very much chicken or something like that.
That's
Something
funny.
like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny, but great point. And then Exodus 20, verse 26 tells the priest, nor shall you go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it. So even if the garment was long enough, if you're looking up and the priest is walking up steps and you're down below and looking up, you could see something you're not supposed to see, called nakedness, right? So that verse shows that. And then there's one in Isaiah 47, verses 2 and 3. This is describing a punishment that was going to happen to Babylon. Kind of a graphic verse, but it illustrates the point we want to make. It says, take off the skirt, uncover the thigh, pass through the rivers, your nakedness shall be uncovered. Yes, your shame will be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not arbitrate with the man. Basically, again, Babylon is being punished there, and God says that as they are trying to escape, they're not going to escape, but as they're trying to escape and they're taking their skirt off and they're uncovering the thigh to try to swim through the river, their nakedness was going to be uncovered. Well, uncovering the thigh is nakedness.
Yeah.
And it says that their shame was going to be seen. Again, we mentioned that earlier, shamefacedness. We should be ashamed to uncover our nakedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will add to this because some brethren that I'll just say in Florida, because that's where they were, and in Florida this is kind of a hard deal. But they were like, oh, but this is not a real person. This is an illustration. And I was like, yeah, but the elements of the illustration are true.
Right.
That's what makes it a good illustration, is that the elements are true. And so anyway, yeah. So just because this is not a literal person that they're talking to, and rather a group of people that's being discussed, and it's not, like I said, not a literal person, the elements of it are true. We can go back and, as we mentioned, in Exodus 28 and 20, that, the thigh's nakedness, it does not change here. And I've had people argue that point so many times, and it's like, listen, it says it other places, so I don't even need this verse to say this, but you're making a terrible argument here. It doesn't make any sense.
It is an absolute stretch, for sure. One more verse, Genesis chapter 9. Remember when Noah had become drunken and naked in his tent, and one of the sons saw it and pointed it out? Ham saw it kind of in a mocking way and pointed it out to his brothers. The brothers, Genesis 9, verse 23, it says that they took a garment, they laid it on both their shoulders, and they went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Why did they do that? Because you're not supposed to look at people's nakedness, with the exception, of course, of Hebrews 13:4, marriage bed, or maybe a medical reason. There might be a medical reason, but we're not supposed to be looking at people's nakedness normally.
Yeah.
So they walked backwards. They covered it.
Yeah, and there's some things about this passage I've kind of wondered. I kind of wondered if Ham did something here.
Yeah, I've heard scholars debate that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But it does seem that there's something has happened for them to know that Ham saw it, right, in some sort of way.
Well, at the very least, he mocked the situation.
Yeah, he might have come out and said, "Hey, Dad's in there,"
Right.
And that's not, not good. And plus, I think the situation altogether is just, a bad situation. And so, yeah, they went and saved the dignity of their father is what they did.
Absolutely. We could have mentioned David and Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first step in that long process of a lot of sins that David committed.
Yep.
The first step was he saw her bathing, and he lusted at that point, and then he kept pursuing that. If he had seen her by accident and then immediately looked away, he would have been fine.
Yep.
That's not what he did.
No.
So, yep, that's what we wanted to cover as far as what the Bible says about this subject. Again, a tough subject. We're not reveling and enjoying the fact that we have to cover this, especially because we know there's probably some listeners that really don't like what we have to say about this, but this is what the Bible teaches. And so we're going to teach the truth on it. A final thought, this is your father-in-law, actually, Brother Tim Kidwell. Do you remember when he preached the particular sermon that we're going to bring up? Was it a long time ago, or?
It is probably in the 80s or 90s. It might have been the 90s by this point that he taught this. I remember kind of where he was. So yeah, I think it was like early 90s.
He basically he preached a sermon on the dangers of mixed swimming.
Yes.
And modesty was a big part of that sermon, and a lot of people had a problem with it. So basically what he did was he asked a lot of leading voices among preachers what their thoughts were on the subject. Basically, I'll let you tell the rest of the story, but and some of this is mentioned in your book, the book that you and Ryan Beavers wrote called Conformed or Transformed.
Right.
Basically, they acted like he didn't know what he was talking about. He needed to seek the advice of an older, wiser preacher or something along those lines. So what was said, basically?
Yeah, so somebody was defending the fact that they thought that you could, go mixed swimming, boys and girls in the same area wearing bathing suits. And the modern bathing suit was the thought process,
bikini or even like a one piece.
Yeah, just even a one piece. Yeah. I think maybe even they said, well, the bikini's out, but it's like, I don't know that for sure. But
right.
A lot of people were making that excuse like, well, we're not going to be, having girls wearing bikinis. They're going to be wearing a modest one piece. And it's like, well, that's not quite modest.
Still not modest, right?
But yeah, so they basically, I'm just going to kind of paraphrase what happened, but they were like, well, you're just a young guy. You don't know anything. You go talk to some older preachers and they'll set you straight. And so he did. I'll read from the book Conformed or Transformed, which is easily available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it from Christian Family Bookstore. There's several bookstores that you can actually get it from Barnes and Noble and whatnot. So, but anyway, the book, in here we say this is what my father-in-law wrote. Is there a faithful gospel preacher among us who would defend the modern day swimming attire and the beach environment? As a younger preacher in my early 30s, several men who defended this attire and atmosphere challenged me. They consider me still green and wet behind the ears. These spiritually minded, in quotations, brethren believe we should teach modest attire, but we should not give examples of what is immodest or identify environments that promote immodest attire. They were convinced that if I were to consult older, more seasoned preachers concerning this subject, I would learn that I was only preaching my opinion. Without hesitation, I agreed and wrote several well-known gospel preachers. I informed them of the situation and asked for their input considering my conclusion. Here are excerpts from their replies. So these are not the entirety of their replies, but just excerpts.
And just to reiterate, this is Tim Kidwell,
right,
who wrote these words a while back, and you have included it in an appendix in your book.
Right, correct, right. Yes. So Garland Elkins from the Memphis School of Preaching wrote, "You are on solid and safe scriptural ground when you oppose immodesty. The Bible certainly teaches that immodesty is sinful. There are many defenders of immodesty, but there is no defense. Of course, the activity of swimming is not wrong, but the scant bathing suits and near nudity are indeed wrong. It is wrong to expose one's nakedness, whether in a bathing suit, shorts, or a dress, etc. It is proper to give examples of immodesty." See, Buster Dobbs, editor of the Firm Foundation, wrote, shamefacedness helps define the word modest. It means, among other things, bashful. A person who is timid, shy, and easily embarrassed will not expose as much flesh as the average bathing suit bears. Someone asked the question, if today's swimming attire is modest, how much more would a person have to take off to be immodest? Your position on this question is doubtless correct. Leroy Brownlow, minister, writer, and publisher, wrote, we know that we are considering a command, 1 Timothy 2:9, and we know that the purpose of a command is to apply it and control the conduct of an individual. Why have a command if you don't apply it? Yet there are those who don't object to preaching, 1 Timothy 2:9, if you don't apply it. But if a preacher does not help the people to apply a command, what is his job? Robert Taylor, minister and writer, wrote, you are right in what you have preached, and they should hold high your hands. You are right to name mixed swimming as a specific example of immodest dress. The families there who participate in such should give it up promptly. Such is not becoming a Christian. Johnny Ramsey, minister and teacher for the Brown Trail School of Preaching, wrote, I agree with you 100%. What you said and the applications made are needed everywhere. We must apply what we preach on any subject, and certainly on modesty in these wicked and worldly days. David Farr, minister, writer, past director of the East Tennessee School of Preaching, wrote, in summary, of course, you are right in warning against swimming suits or anything else which provoke lust. These are times when such things need to be specifically named. V.P. Black, minister and writer, said, the Bible has much to say about modesty. We are living in an age when the world looks upon modesty as a joke. We, as children of God, should look upon modesty in the light of the Word of God and not in the light of the world. There is not anything wrong with giving examples. Winfred Clark, elder, minister, author, wrote, as to the matter of modesty, there can be no doubt that mixed swimming, males and females, would violate the teaching of 1 Timothy 2:9. If a swimsuit would not be immodest by Paul's definition, then it would be hard to find a garment that could be called immodest. I am sure you know that Thayer defines apparel as a lowering, a letting down, a garment let down. It seems that the background would be that of ladies who went into the fields to work and would raise their dresses and fold them into something like a belt or girdle. Thus, Paul would speak of the lowering the garment to cover the nakedness thus exposed. One would surely have a difficult time lowering the modern attire used for swimming.
So those are just a few excerpts of that longer article. There are a few other, for sake of time, a few other preachers that were also mentioned that we didn't have you read, Matt, but I almost called you Michael. Oh, boy. I don't know what's going on. It's like you and Michael are the same guy or something.
Oh,
but
it's crazy.
I know. But anyways, toward the end of the article, he mentioned something else, and there was only one preacher that responded that disagreed with him. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And who was that?
That was Rubel Shelley.
Rubel Shelley.
Yeah.
And
yes.
for those who may not know, he's not exactly known for sticking to the truth on very many things. So
right. Yeah. He's left the faith. Really. He has just completely gone astray on several issues. Of course, this being one of them. And he had already left at this point. But yeah, that was interesting.
Yes, sir. Well, any final thoughts, Matt? Appreciate you for helping me with this episode. I knew, like I said, you're the guy for the job because you're just so modest, handsome but modest.
Handsome but modest. That's right. There's nothing I can add to it.
Well, how modest of you. Well, we appreciate our listeners. This has been a long episode. If you're listening by now, I've probably chopped it into 2 episodes, but I guess we'll find out on that. But appreciate you for tuning in to the Everyday Christian Podcast. And Lord willing, next Monday, we'll be back with another episode, Season 9 of the Everyday Christian Podcast.